There are two ways to plan a recipe. One is to be extravagant, the other is to be cost effective. We decided to split the difference by only making 1 liter of a macadamia nut blossom mead. Something that we really liked about this process was how easy it was to actually do this experiment. And with the much smaller quantities, everything just happens a lot quicker. For example, this is just 9 ounces of macadamia nut blossom honey. This little jar is almost twice as much as a pound of orange blossom honey. Straight up, a full gallon of this could cost almost $100. So yeah, sometimes even a gallon can be a bridge too far. But how does it taste? Well, unique. It's very grassy and floral with a macadamia-ness to it. There's also a bit of a zing that comes to it that is hard to describe and one must taste to experience. Not something that I've had with other honeys, even other Hawaiian honeys. There's a sample set that we really like that we'll put an affiliate link for down in the description, along with any of the other specialized equipment that we're using today. Like these jars. They're great, we love them. But what we're going to do now is fast forward to when Phil's done mixing in all the honey. It's a little small to use a power drill, though a immersion stick would probably work. And because we filmed this over the span of 3 months, we've done other liter recipes, and yeah, the immersion stick works great. But the refractometer remains the best way to get a gravity reading when working with such small quantities. It would be cool to be able to do a gravity reading with an actual hydrometer, but they don't make mini hydrometers. But that's fine, because we have a refractometer and we know how to calibrate it. So after we get our reading of about 1075, we're going to move forward with pitching the yeast, once Phil wrangles down whatever was falling over. Now, for some reason, he gives it another stir for good luck. And then, for some reason, acknowledging that we have the Go Firm, but that he's just choosing not to use it on purpose for some reason, we would still recommend to use Go Firm in this case, and you would just use in equal parts to 1.2 grams of yeast. Today's recipe is calling for a D47, because we want those fruity flavors to kind of come through as much as possible. Really, on these varietals, we recommend anything other than EC 1118. It just strips a lot of the flavors out. And now we're just going to throw in the airlock for about 24 hours until we're going to give the first nutrient dose. If you're following along with your own 1 liter recipe, the trick is look for when the airlock starts to take off. That's when you want to add your first dose of nutrients. Ideally before it births its first bubble from out the bottom. But close is good enough for horseshoes and hand grenades, as long as you're not doing it for a living. As when we jump forward, we kind of skip to 36 hours later, and fermentation is a little past lag phase. And using what looks to be way too much water, we're going to only be mixing 0.2 grams of Fermented O into a small amount of liquid. We are using distilled water. This is to help prevent an explosion of CO2 when you add it in. We didn't record it happening, but we will actually do this addition twice. Once now, and another time about 3 weeks from now, or more specifically, when about half of the sugar has been eaten by the yeast. This will ensure that we get a strong and firm fermentation. This has been great up till now, but we're going to have a problem when it comes to do a transfer. We're going to need some special equipment. Sure, you could use a mini auto siphon, but we're going to be using a peristaltic pump. These are actually really cool because the liquid never leaves the hose line. It never goes into a pump head, as 3 small pegs go around in a circle, causing the tension that creates the self-priming pump action. I don't know, I'm a zymergist, not an engineer. We'll look into it in another video, though. We do love the pump, though we learned in this round that we probably should use a flow restrictor on the outlet side to create more of an even flow rather than a sputter. Unfortunately, a lot of other parts of these videos have already been recorded before we got those parts in and done proper testing. That's part of what makes all this experimental. But what we're doing today is getting ready to stabilize and clarify this basically already clear mead. So basically just racking off of the dead yeast cells. This takes our pump about 2 to 3 minutes to do the transfer, but we're going to speed up through it to value your time. In fact, that's why we do headless videos, so we can do the voiceover later and cut out all the ums and ers and and all the weird shit people just don't do a second take for. Grow up, guys. Now, stabilization is something that you more so hear from people that are going to back sweeten, but we're going to actually not finish fermentation and use any remaining sugar as the sweetness. Otherwise, we'd have to order more macadamia nut blossom honey. Now, if we were adding sugar, you would want to also use potassium metabisulfite along with this to prevent re-fermentation. But since this is already sugar that the yeast has avoided once, we don't need to worry too much about it. But a little insurance would be nice. And by the way, way to go, Phil. We think you probably overshot the amount of sorbate that you added on. It looks like a large chunk was stuck to the backside of the spoon. Not a big deal, probably still way less than what a commercial mead would have in it. And now for our last classic blunder for the video. The universal bungs don't work for the 1000 milliliter flasks. I mean, every now and then you get one that you luck out with, but the number 8 bung is the preferred size for this. And the next day we went to the local homebrew supply shop to fix this problem quick. No worries, we let this bulk age for about a month before we moved on to bottling. And since we're using these 187 milliliter bottles, we should be getting just shy of about a 6-pack. Now, before we had a bit of an option on the peristaltic pump, but for bottling, I don't really see another way outside of making your own custom tiny bottling bucket or doing it on the racking cane, which is going to happen fast. Another downside that we're going to be experiencing in a moment is that because this isn't designed for actual bottling, that it's not going to displace that perfect amount, so we're going to have to wing it a bit. Also, the gyrations of the pump make the tubes rattle like the dickens. We are going to fast forward again, but it takes about 25 seconds to fill up each of these bottles. Now, I know 1 liter venting isn't going to be everyone's cup of tea, and that's going to have to do partly with the fact that they don't understand the metric system. But as you can see, you can do these small experimental batches without making that many compromises on the process that you're going through. Just a few pieces of special equipment that you'll have to get. But it's been great because any time that we have to do a phase or a process, it takes about a quarter to even less amount of time. Some things have taken less than 5 minutes to get done, and bottling today took less than 10 minutes. So there is something to be said about time saved. That's normally why we prefer to use the crown capper on these small bottles. It just takes next to no time at all, and most of the time when we make such a small batch, it's not going to last long anyways, so why waste the time with the cork? As long as you're not going to age it like 5 years, it's going to be fine. But if you're going to use corks, one thing to keep in mind that even though these are smaller bottles, the average size cork is also going to fit in there. Just don't use the easy double lever corker. This thing is anything but easy. It's a piece of trash, and I hate it with a passion. And if you plan to use corks with any kind of regularity, you're going to want to use the Portuguese floor corker. Now, it out of the box will not work with these smaller bottles. The platform is just too far away. We have been using a jar as a glass spacer, but that could cause a problem and be dangerous as the amount of pressure that corking does could break the glass over time. As always, when using your products outside of manufacturer's guidelines, you are always taking on the risk and liability yourself. But we do it, and Phil hasn't died yet. And for the most part, it's quick and relatively efficient, and without any camera magic, we have corked a bottle. And if you want to be super fancy, yes, in fact, you can put a cork in and then put a crown cap on top of it. This is actually really cool because if you wanted to do corks but still not risk getting any liquids on your cellar floor from re-fermentation, you got it covered both ways. But how does it taste, you ask? Well, perfect timing because I just happen to have a chilled bottle right here ready to go. For the aroma, I'm getting a mild floral earthiness, but not very much of anything. It's got a little nuttiness to it, but mostly mild. And the taste, it's kind of dulled in a lot of the uniqueness that made the macadamia nut honey special, but it's still got a lot of that floral flavor. This definitely would have been better as a back sweetener than as the main ingredient to the mead. Next time I think I would just use the macadamia nut blossom honey as a back sweetener and use something more generic like orange blossom honey as a base. Just to get that full body richness without having to spend a lot of money that would be lost once the fermentation is over anyways. And if you like the videos we make, why don't you check out some of the other ones here? And don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe.